I started yesterday by talking about the Baroque dance tradition, and I want to go back to that a little bit and put what Buxtehude did in a little bit more context for us. As you remember or already know, this Baroque dance tradition was more or less invented and codified at the court of Louis XIV. Louis XIV, the King of France. France was in a very different situation in the 1670s and 80s than Germany. Can you think of why that might be? The 30 Years' War ended in 1648, and it was basically a civil war in Germany. Every area in Germany had its own prince, and those princes were variously Catholic and Protestant, and we certainly don't need to go into the whole history of the 30 Years' War here, because that would take hours and hours. But the important thing to know is that after this civil war was finished, every princely state was still in place. Every state, Dresden and Würzburg and there were dozens and dozens. Everyone had its own government and its own court. And as Reconstruction happened and people began to have money again, every one of those courts looked to the court of Louis XIV as a model for legitimacy of power. And one of the ways you are legitimately powerful as a court is that you imitate and recreate the culture of Louis XIV's court. So here's do you all know this book? You should all own this book. It's Dance and the Music of J.S. Bach by Meredith Little and Natalie Chen. And it's a wonderful overview of the dance tradition related to Bach's pieces. But I wanted to read you something about Louis XIV, because I think this helps a great deal to understand how important this tradition was also in Germany. So Louis XIV reigned from 1661 to 1715. France experienced an especially prosperous and influential period of her history, unlike Germany, with its many small competing states. Now we know why. Louis XIV was a lifelong lover of aristocratic dancing. Even as a youth, he and his friends dressed up in fanciful costumes and danced in ballets for their own amusement. A ballet required the support services of scene designers, costumers, singers, dancers, poets, and musicians. Every year, at least one new ballet was presented, most often in the season between Christmas and Lent. It was usual for a ballet to be organized around a theme. Remember this, we're going to come back to this tomorrow. A theme such as the 7 liberal arts, or an event from classical mythology, such as the birth of Venus. Ballets normally did not have a strong central plot, but consisted of a series of vocal airs loosely organized around this theme. So, and then here's also a description of social dancing. Aristocrats at the court of Louis XIV enjoyed social dancing using the same steps and movement styles as the ballet, but wearing formal dress instead of costumes. Elegant ceremonial balls were held to celebrate important events of the realm, such as military victory, the signing of a treaty, the marriage of a socially prominent person, or someone's birthday. So this is a way of creating legitimacy in the state with art and culture. They often occurred after an evening of theater or other recreation. But unlike social dancing today, these events were carefully planned and rehearsed, and only the best recreational dancers performed, while the assembled company watched and admired. The king sat at the head of the room, with members of the court arranged around him according to rank. He and his partner danced the first dance, after which everyone else in the royal company danced one couple at a time in order of rank. So it is the performance of the pecking order at court. And I bet it was nervous-making. Social in the sense of highly stressful. The dancing couple began at the foot of the room, facing the king. The musicians were usually behind them or in raised galleries on the side of the room. Every dance began and ended with a formal reverence to one's partner as well as to the king. Almost all of the dances consisted of special written choreographies which were memorized beforehand. Other members of the court had learned the same choreographies and would know if they were performed correctly. So what we're talking about is a situation that we will come back to with Hans Davidson too, about rhetoric. Rhetoric. This is a rhetoric of a dance, right? And everyone in the room has studied the same rhetoric. So they will, Marta, do you want to say what you said just before class about these choreographies? If you just look at the first page of your...
It's like paintings.
It's like paintings, yeah. So there are proportions. The rhetoric of these shapes you can also see in Baroque paintings, right? But the people who were watching these dances would also have practiced these and would know whether they were being performed correctly. When we talk about rhetoric in Baroque music, we talk about Baroque rhetorical figures, and that's something we started to talk about yesterday. If you were performing using these Baroque figures, these words at the keyboard, other people would understand it because they also studied rhetoric. I gave a presentation about Baroque figures and emblems, and we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. And with a scholar on Bach and primarily Bach and liturgy, although he's done many other things. Robin Lever is a name you should know. And Robin made this wonderful statement. It finally made sense to me in a new way. In the Lateinschule in Germany, when you went to school, you studied rhetoric. Everyone did. And some of them became doctors, and some of them became priests, and some of them became musicians. But everyone had the same education. So when a pastor stood in a pulpit and gave a sermon using the principles of rhetoric, everyone participated in that discourse. So what I love about this is that I think this gives us a new sense of musical notation. Because here it is so obvious that this is not the dance, right? This is a beautiful shape. It looks like painting, but it's not people giving these movements an affect and a meaning. And I think sometimes, although none of you do this, I'm sure, sometimes we make the mistake of looking at Baroque music notation and thinking that our job is to play all of the notes in the right order. And that is no more true than it would be for two dancers to put their feet in the right places in the room, in the right order, without doing anything else. So the leap from notes to figures, gestures at the clavichord is what we're going to talk about today. Before we get there, so why was Buxtehude writing these? In Germany, in a free state. I think the answer is that because all of these courts and free states needed the legitimacy of this art form, there was a huge market for dance masters. So French dancing masters came from France and were employed in almost every court. So there was a direct line from the tradition around the court of Louis XIV to everywhere, not just Germany, but England and Sweden and Denmark and Poland. And so there was this great need for these dance masters to come and actually teach the steps. And very soon, so already in the 80s, this set of pieces that began with an allemande and then courante, sarabande, and gigue were codified. And playing these pieces at home was a little bit like listening to the opera on the radio or reading a book about a performance. So you were able to participate as an individual person in this much larger, kind of culturally loaded phenomenon by being able to sit at home at your own keyboard and play these things. Buxtehude wrote these suites for solo keyboard. We don't know, but obviously they're very harpsichord-like. And the reason we're using the clavichord is because it gives us a very clear and direct line into playing figures expressively that we can also then use at the harpsichord. Most of these pieces, all but very few of them, exist in one source, and it was discovered rather late. It's the Riga manuscript, R-Y-G-E. It was in private hands for years and years and years, and now it's in the National Library of Copenhagen. And it's in German tablature notation. And so, frankly, these pieces haven't been studied very much. They came onto the scene late, and two new ones were just discovered within the last few years. Some of the pieces in the Riga manuscript that are marked Buxtehude are actually Lebesgue, Nicolas Lebesgue. And I think that shows how much direct influence and sort of discussion on paper there was between French and German composers for these pieces. If we look at the second page of your handout, you see metric levels in Baroque dances. This is Meredith Little and Natalie Jen's system, and I think it works very well. We have three levels: the level of the beat, and the pulse, and the tap. So the beat gives you the big meter for the dance. And at the pulse, you can also make dance steps. But at the tap level, unless you're really a professional, you don't do very much. I think this is also really important for us as keyboard performers. Because at the piano or at the organ, where it's so easy to emphasize this tap level, we often get performances of running eighth notes and running 16th notes where all of them have equal weight. As a Baroque dancer, you would not be doing anything there. Or if you were, it would be to ornament another larger beat. So that's something we can come back to too. This is just for your own pleasure, so you see this overview of what different kinds of dances have in terms of major beats. We'll do the gigs a little bit later in the week. They're very confusing, but there are so many different kinds. But if you look near the bottom, the saraband, the polonaise, the chaconne, the passacaglia, and the corrente all have the same beat, pulse, and tap level. It goes in three. It's basically 3/4 notes to the beat. And at the pulse level, we can have some effect, which means at the pulse level we maybe want occasionally to make accents. But at the tap level, we'll just be playing sort of beautiful strong and weak patterns of running 16th